I didn't even get to sit down. Your position has been eliminated, Brenda said, without a glance, without a breath of humanity, just that tight, Botox-stiff smile she always wore when she knew she was being cruel in public. Her voice echoed through the open office like a fire alarm nobody wanted to silence. The copier whirred behind me. Carol at the front desk gasped. Kyle, the intern who still called PowerPoint the Big Slides app, froze mid-bite into a banana muffin. There was a cardboard box already waiting. That was the worst part. Not the public shaming, not even the abruptness. It was the planning. Someone had pre-folded the box. They'd known. Not just Brenda. Not just HR. Someone had prepared this moment like a party favor. And I was the party. I didn't speak. I didn't ask why. I didn't beg for a meeting. I reached for the mug my father gave me when I got this job. Black ceramic, white letters. I build things that last. The handle was chipped from when it fell during the office move. Brenda insisted on just to prove she could disrupt workflow like a startup. Beside it sat the flash drive I always carried, the one no one ever asked about, and a framed photo of Dad at the docks, smiling in front of a cargo crane. That photo had been with me since day one. My hands were steady, not shaking, not cold, just still. Like my body had gone into preservation mode, the way animals freeze when the predators circle. I put everything into the box, clicked the lid shut, nodded once to Kyle, who looked like he wanted to throw himself between me and the door, and left. And if you're still listening, take a second and hit the subscribe button and like this video. It helps this channel survive. And most people don't realize how much that means to us. Really. I didn't cry in the elevator. I didn't cry on the walk to my car. Not even when I passed the potted ficus they made me haul upstairs on my first day. Because logistics is your thing, right? I didn't cry when my badge beeped red for the first time in 6 years. But I did cry, quietly, when I got home and sat on the floor. Just for a moment. Not because I was sad, because I knew they'd just made the worst mistake of their lives. See, Brenda didn't know what I'd built. Neither did the people upstairs. While they'd been busy buying beanbag chairs and hiring fresh-faced consultants with TikTok resumes, I'd been building the actual infrastructure that kept Whitmere from collapsing like a wet paper straw. My tools, my code, my optimization maps that saved them hundreds of thousands in shipping errors alone. And none of it was owned by them. They always saw me as background noise, the one who fixed things but never asked for credit, the one who'd stay late without complaint, the one who trained new hires without being asked, the quiet one. They thought that made me disposable. What they didn't realize is quiet doesn't mean compliant. Quiet doesn't mean powerless. It means calculating, watching, learning exactly where the cracks are and how to widen them. At 4:13 p.m., someone from HR called. I let it go to voicemail. At 4:27, they emailed. I deleted it. At 5:06 p.m., a different number rang. This time, I picked up. It was Veronica from legal, asking, more like begging, if I could come in for an exit conversation to clarify intellectual property boundaries. I told her I was busy. She didn't push back. By 6:42 p.m., I'd changed my number, and by 7:03 p.m., there was a pounding on my apartment door, not a knock, a pounding, like someone trying to break in. I looked through the peephole and saw the CEO, Harold Kincaid. His face was red, his tie was crooked, his forehead glistened. I didn't open the door. I just stood there, watching him, while he yelled through the wood, "Angela, what the hell did you do?" I didn't answer. I just walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine, and pulled up the live dashboard for Coraline. My system, my rules, and they had no idea what was about to hit them. It started the morning after I was fired. I sat at the kitchen table in my robe, my laptop humming, coffee going cold, and a half-eaten piece of toast trembling on the edge of my plate from how hard I was typing. I wasn't angry. I was focused. Rage burns too fast. I wanted something slower, something that lasts. So I opened the folders I'd compiled over 6 years. Notes, sketches, bug reports, process maps, stuff no one cared about, stuff Brenda had once called your little side puzzles. Except these puzzles ran the damn company. Whitmere never understood that logistics isn't sexy. It's not supposed to be. It's elegant, precise. And I was done begging to make it better. So I started sketching out the bones of something new, something lean. No legacy systems, no bloated middleware, no Brenda breathing down my neck asking if I could make the data more fun. I called it Coraline, after the street my dad used to park on when he took me to the shipping yard after his shifts. It was gritty, quiet, efficient. Coraline didn't try to be everything. It did one thing perfectly, made fulfillment chains smarter without making operators feel like idiots. I coded through the winter, ate too much ramen, forgot to pay my internet bill twice. I borrowed $5,000 from a friend I used to work with at an old startup. He only asked one question. Is this finally yours? By the end of year 1, I had a working prototype and a quiet little test contract with a small regional carrier out of Tennessee. They didn't care that I was working from my apartment. They cared that my system caught a faulty routing loop that had been draining them $19,000 a month. Year 2 was different. Word got around. I never advertised, didn't need to, just delivered. I onboarded 2 more clients, both direct competitors of Whitmere. One of them even emailed me a spreadsheet once saying, "Hey, this looks like something your old company used to use. Just way better." I smiled at that one for a full minute, but I didn't gloat. Not even when I heard Whitmere's COO bragging at a conference about their internal optimization suite, which still ran on an Excel plugin I wrote in 2019 and they never updated. I could have called them out. I could have gone public. But I knew better. Visibility attracts noise, and noise ruins precision. Every update I pushed to Coraline came from something Whitmere wouldn't let me fix. Every ugly workaround I was forced to code in that old hellhole became a clean module here. I designed it like an engineer, but I also designed it like a survivor. No single point of failure, no reliance on flaky APIs, and absolutely no way to be ripped off without me knowing. I kept things lean, scaled carefully, quietly. I'd learned to listen before speaking, measure before striking. Coraline wasn't a company, it was a scalpel, and I had no interest in swinging wildly. My father noticed the change first. We'd talk every Sunday. He'd ask how it was going, and I'd always say, steady. One night, he said, "Your voice sounds like when you used to build toy bridges, focused, dangerous." I laughed, but he wasn't wrong. I wasn't trying to destroy Whitmere. I was trying to replace them, one piece at a time. It was a Tuesday morning when I saw the brief, buried halfway down a weekly industry digest, wedged between 2 fluff articles about disruptive warehousing, and the rise of drone delivery. There it was. Whitmere Logistics Board to evaluate strategic acquisition proposals in Q3. It should have meant nothing. Companies shift hands all the time, but I'd learned how to read between corporate lines. Strategic proposals was code. It meant fire sale. I sat back, reread the line, then again. I could practically hear Harold's voice in my head. We'll never need outside money. We're bulletproof. Funny. Nothing bleeds faster than arrogance. I minimized the window and pulled up 3 monitors. One for financials, one for hiring data, one for client logs, and I went to work. They were hemorrhaging. First, the telltale signs, slowing recruitment, backfilled C-suite roles, rising attrition. Their VP of Innovation left 6 months ago. Quietly. No announcement. I found her LinkedIn update buried under a layer of meaningless hashtags. She was now working for a firm I'd onboarded 6 weeks ago. Next, the numbers. Whitmere had ballooned their valuation on paper by reclassifying liabilities as deferred assets. Accounting sleight of hand. Legal, sure. But it only works if no one looks too hard. And I looked. More interesting? Their customer churn rate had doubled since last year. Why? Because 3 of their former top accounts were now mine. They didn't even know they'd been poached. They'd spent millions trying to pivot into AI-automated logistics. But the systems didn't talk to each other. I recognized half the back-end errors. They were just repackaged versions of bugs I'd flagged years ago. Bugs Brenda told me to stop obsessing over. And now those same bugs were dragging them underwater. So I made one call to a boutique law firm I'd worked with during Corlin's second funding round. We'd stayed in touch. I'd helped his sister land a job in systems architecture. All I said was, how fast can you incorporate a shell with a neutral name and quiet money? By Friday, Lysa Holdings LLC had submitted a formal expression of interest to Whitmere's board. Clean language, standard structure, no red flags, just enough teeth to draw a reaction. It looked like an equity firm based out of Raleigh, strong enough to be real, bland enough to be forgettable. But it was me. I had the offer priced just slightly above their current valuation, enough to make the board look twice, but not enough to signal desperation. The board would see it as a win, a lifeline, a path to offload. Harold would see it as salvation. What none of them would see, at least not yet, was the footnote in the offer agreement reserving all technology assessment rights to a third-party consultant. And I already knew who that consultant would be. I wasn't coming back to Whitmere to gloat. I wasn't coming back for applause. I was coming back to dissect the company that tried to erase me, piece by piece, from the inside. No one suspected a thing. Not the board, not the execs, not even Brenda. Especially not Brenda. That was the part I couldn't wait for. The badge they printed for me said Angie L. Not Angela, not Ms. Lang, just Angie. White sticker slapped onto a cheap plastic card, crooked like someone applied it during a sneeze. And the role? Contractor, data audit support. Not even internal. Temp staff. No onboarding, no bio slide on the team newsletter. Just a desk near the recycling bins and a chair that creaked if you breathed too hard. Perfect. I wore wire-framed glasses that weren't prescription, dyed my hair a little darker, swapped my usual boots for bland sneakers, and kept my shoulders slouched just enough to make my presence feel forgettable. I even made my voice a touch higher, breathier, when I introduced myself. No one blinked. No one stared too long. They didn't even ask what I used to do. First day, Brenda walked right past me. She was too busy fake laughing with some junior exec about streamlining headcount. I kept my face neutral, nodding politely when she brushed past. She had no clue. The same woman who escorted me out 3 years ago now stood 6 feet away and offered me a granola bar like I was some new intern lost in the wrong department. When she handed me the first audit request, she didn't even look me in the eye. Just dropped a manila folder on my desk with a sigh and muttered, "Don't mess this up. We're 2 days behind already." No please, no explanation. Just dumped data, mislabeled tabs, and a spreadsheet so bloated it needed prayer. I said, "Yes, ma'am," without flinching. They had no idea. I started combing through the data like a surgeon with a scalpel. License violations, redundant vendor payouts, overlapping software contracts billed to 5 different departments, and most damning of all, 2 backdated compliance audits with internal signatures that didn't match the timestamps. I knew what I was looking for. I'd spent years reverse engineering their rot from the outside. Now I had it at the source. At lunch, I sat alone, plastic spoon, bland chicken noodle. The cafeteria hadn't changed. Same vending machine buzz, same broken clock above the microwave stuck at 12:04 like time itself got tired. I kept my ears open. People talk freely around temps. We're wallpaper. And then I heard it. Harold, the CEO, loud as ever, nursing some overpriced smoothie like it earned him moral superiority, talking to 2 board liaisons in the corner. "You remember Angela?" he chuckled. "The quiet one, data wonk. She wanted to rebuild our whole supply tree manually. Fired her right before the AI wave hit, saved us a fortune." One of them laughed. "Close call?" Harold sipped his smoothie. "Yeah, good riddance. She wouldn't have lasted anyway." My spoon paused halfway to my mouth. Quiet rage tastes like metal, like biting a nail. I smiled into my soup. I didn't react. I didn't rise. I didn't flinch. Because in 3 days, the consultant from Lysa Holdings would arrive for tech due diligence. And when they did, they'd ask to meet the internal audit contractor who discovered multiple process anomalies. That contractor would be me. And the man sipping a kale smoothie while rewriting my obituary would finally learn that ghosts don't stay quiet forever. The days bled into each other like a well-oiled metronome. Click, extract, zip, send. I came in early. I left late. I never complained. To the rest of the office, I was just another replaceable temp trying to earn a full-time slot. They didn't know I already owned the lock they were trying to pick. I kept my face neutral as I dug deeper. Brenda kept assigning me files like I was doing her a favor, unaware she was handing me the keys to her own funeral pyre. I never requested access. I just quietly found the back doors. Passwords scribbled on sticky notes. Permissions left wide open because IT already approved it. I didn't even need to hack. They'd been leaving the vault open for years. I just walked in and took inventory. The first folder I compiled was titled Deadwood, a graveyard of inactive vendors, fake contractor invoices, and shell account payments that hadn't been flagged in over a year. Total waste, $2.3 million. I found 6 software licenses billed monthly to terminated employee accounts. One of them had been dead for 18 months. Dead. As in obituary on Google Dead, still pulling a full-stack tool budget. Next came patchwork. Dozens of compliance logs that looked fine on paper until you noticed the audit trails had been overwritten. Internal timestamps didn't line up with file saves. Digital fingerprints wiped, but not perfectly. I knew what to look for, the small inconsistencies that don't scream at the eye but whisper to the right mind. Everything was zipped, encrypted, transferred to a fresh server set up under a throwaway Gmail alias with plausible deniability and a VPN so clean it could pass a TSA check. From there, the entire bundle was forwarded directly to Whitmer's board. Anonymous, of course, but with just enough specificity to prove insider access. I knew their board members by name, by vice, by sleeping schedule. I timed the email to arrive at 4:01 a.m., just after the East Coast execs had settled in, and before Harold's gatekeeping admin started filtering his inbox. By the time I walked into the office that morning, Brenda's jaw was already locked so tight I thought she'd crack a crown. She wasn't sure what had hit her, only that it stung. And while they flailed, Lysa Holdings quietly submitted an amended bid, down 12%, citing recently uncovered compliance concerns that may impact long-term valuation. The phrasing was surgical, non-accusatory, just enough to make them squirm. The board wouldn't pull out, not when the roof was on fire, and Lysa was the only buyer not asking for a fire sale discount. But they'd have to explain it, internally, publicly. That explanation would cost them more than money. Meanwhile, I made 2 side calls, one to Radnor Freight, one to Eastern Spoke. Both had been clients of Whitmer. Both had left. Both had tested Corlin in sandbox trials under NDA. Neither had yet signed. But today, they did. Clean contracts, multi-year, scaled pricing that would cripple Whitmer's renewal attempts. By lunch, Corlin had onboarded $4.8 million in projected annual flow. No noise, no press releases, just small ripples moving under the surface. I sat at my desk, sipping cold tea, watching Brenda storm from meeting to meeting with a scowl that could gut a fish. She passed me twice, never looked up, still didn't know my name, still didn't know I had cut the lines to every anchor she'd tied herself to. Every move I made had a rhythm, a slow, perfect rhythm. Not jazz, not chaos, orchestra. And I was conducting the whole damn pit. It started with a calendar change, the kind that sneaks in without a chime, just a new block of red at 7:30 a.m. titled Urgent Strategic Session. Only C-suite names on the invite, except mine. I wasn't supposed to see it, but Brenda had forwarded me the wrong version of a deck earlier, and her Google permissions were still wide open. By 8:00, the office pulsed with tension. People whispered in corners, printers stuttered, the elevator dinged too loud. Harold hadn't shown up to his morning smoothie walk. That alone meant blood. I kept my head down, moving like a ghost. Everyone was too distracted to notice me weaving through the office like a shadow that didn't belong. When the VP of Ops darted out of a meeting room, pale as drywall, and muttered, "We have to clean this up before Lysa walks," I knew it had landed. My file had made it all the way up. 10 minutes later, Brenda popped her head over my cubicle like a meerkat who just found fire. "Hey, can you help prep slides for a meeting? Executive deck. We're crunched. Don't format it fancy. Just clean and quick. You know, contractor style." Contractor style? I nodded like a good little temp and opened a blank PowerPoint. They wanted numbers? I gave them numbers. I recreated their financials, painfully accurate, line by exposed line. I pulled charts that showed how client churn aligned perfectly with executive restructuring decisions. I outlined their legal exposure risks without once editorializing. all clinical, all sharp. Then, at the end, just one more slide. Black background, white text, centered. Eliminate what you don't understand. Expect the unfamiliar to own you. No name, no signature, just the kind of message that digs under skin and rattles bones. I saved the file with a vanilla name, Q3 Strategic Update Yves final.tptx, and handed it off like any other grunt doing what they're told. Brenda barely looked up from her tablet. Thanks, Angie. They called me Angie? That night, I drove home in silence. No music, just the sound of tires on cracked asphalt and a heart that beat like clockwork. I passed the old warehouse my dad used to work at. Still dark, still abandoned, still his ghost in every corner of my memory. I parked, poured a drink I didn't sip, and finally, after 3 years, called him. Hey, I said, keeping my voice steady. He knew something was off immediately. Kiddo, you all right? I'm fine, Dad, I said, looking out over the city. Don't check the headlines tomorrow. Pause, then, Angela. Wait till noon. I could hear him smile, quiet pride, the kind only a man who's lived through layoffs and broken promises can feel when he hears his daughter leveling the ground. I stayed on the line a minute longer, just breathing. The orchestra was still playing. Tomorrow, the crescendo. The boardroom was too quiet. That kind of sterile silence that smells like air conditioning and fear. Leather chairs pulled in tight, mineral water lined up like soldiers. They dimmed the lights slightly, probably hoping it'd make the numbers on the screen sting less. Brenda sat near the end, arms crossed so tight her veins were showing. Harold, red-faced and sweating through his collar, bounced his leg like it owed him money. The board chair cleared his throat and said, "Let's bring in the Lisa rep." The door opened. Click, click, click. 3 strides and I was in. Tailored navy jacket, hair tied back, minimal makeup. The kind of look that doesn't scream money, it whispers command. I walked straight to the head of the table, set the thick envelope on the polished wood, and looked each one of them in the eye. That's when the CFO choked on her lemon water. Angela? I smiled, not smug, not cruel, surgical. Correction, I said. Majority shareholder. Dead silence. Then Brenda, still catching up, stammered, I don't understand. Of course you don't, I replied, calmly flipping the folder open to the executed merger terms. That's the pattern, isn't it? You eliminate what you don't understand, then panic when it walks back through the door holding the deed. Harold's jaw flexed. His tie looked like it was strangling him. This is a hostile move. No, I said. This is a lawful acquisition facilitated by a holding entity your own counsel cleared. The board approved it unanimously. You signed off, Harold. Page 7. Just above the clause about executive reevaluation during leadership transition. That includes terminations. He lunged forward, voice rising. You lied. You infiltrated the company. I didn't blink. No, I audited it. You handed me the spreadsheets. Brenda looked like she'd swallowed glass. I stood straighter. Let them feel it. The shift in power. The snap of the old bones resetting. Oh, I said almost as an afterthought, and I'll be rehiring someone. Brenda looked up like a drowning woman spotting land. His name's Edmund Lang. Harold's mouth opened, then froze. You fired him 7 years ago, I added. Said he was outdated. But he taught me everything I know about building from the inside, about keeping things running when leadership doesn't understand the system they're steering. The boardroom doors opened again, and my father walked in, gray hair slicked back, blue work shirt, rough hands folded in front of him. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. He looked around the room at the executives who'd once told him to clear out before lunch and said with calm certainty, "Looks like I'm back." You could hear Harold's heart cracking beneath the silence. The same man who once told my dad he was lucky to even get severance now couldn't lift his eyes off the floor. Brenda tried to speak, but her voice caught in her throat like it recognized the sound of consequences. I turned to the board. "This isn't revenge," I said. "It's restoration. You broke something that worked, and now we're rebuilding it." My father stepped beside me. I slid the second folder across the table, his reinstatement terms, with backdated pension reconciliation. "First order of business," I said, "we fix the foundation." The room stayed frozen, but inside me, everything was moving again. Security didn't make a sound when they entered. Just two men in dark suits, no badges visible, no words exchanged. Harold sat frozen, blinking like maybe this was all a mistake. Maybe someone else was the problem. But when one of the guards placed a hand gently, but firmly, on the back of his chair, reality finally seeped into his collar and soaked through his skin. He stood stiffly, like someone trying not to break, adjusted his jacket, tried to speak. "Gentlemen," he croaked, "this is highly irregular." "You signed the clause," I said, not unkindly. Section 12.2 of the acquisition. A change in majority ownership allows for executive restructuring without notice. You approved it during due diligence. Page 17. He blinked. "I highlighted it in yellow," I added. Brenda looked like she wanted to sink through the floor, but the floor had nowhere to go. Harold didn't scream, didn't beg. He just looked around the boardroom, at the faces that no longer met his, and let the final truth sink in. No one was going to save him. He walked out without a word. The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded louder than thunder. I let the silence sit, let it breathe. Then I turned to the board. "You had talent," I said. "You had loyalty. You had infrastructure that ran clean, code that scaled, clients who trusted you. But you didn't want durable. You wanted shiny. You wanted quick wins, flashy resumes, people who looked good on panels." A few of them shifted in their seats. "You chose vanity," I said, "and it cost you." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Every syllable landed like glass-tapping porcelain. One of the board members, a man I remembered vaguely from my intern days, the one who used to walk past without ever making eye contact, cleared his throat. "Miss Lang, why didn't you just come in through the front? If you had this vision, why not pitch it? Why not knock?" I turned toward him, slowly, let my eyes settle on the spot at the far end of the table, where I'd once stood holding a cardboard box while people avoided looking up. "Because the front door leads to HR," I said, "and they never called me back." You could hear a pin drop. Another board member let out a sharp exhale, but no one laughed. This wasn't funny. It was arithmetic, cause, effect, action, consequence. I walked around the table slowly, calmly. "From this point on," I continued, "we're rebuilding, not with the same titles, not with the same habits. We do this lean, clean, and quiet, the way it should have been from the start." No one objected, not even Brenda. I looked at her. She still hadn't moved, still hadn't figured out whether to ask for forgiveness or just vanish. I didn't tell her what her future held. Let her wonder, Let them all wonder. Fallout wasn't always fire. Sometimes it was just silence where the noise used to be. The door to my new office didn't have my name on it. No title, no lettering. Just a clean pane of frosted glass that blurred the edges and kept the noise out. Beyond the far window, the factory floor hummed with steady rhythm. Conveyors moving, pallets shifting, people in steel-toe boots doing work that actually mattered. Real things. Built things. Not decks. Not jargon. Not culture-building brunches. I'd chosen this office on purpose. It wasn't the corner suite. It didn't have a bar cart or imported Italian chairs. It had a direct line of sight to the machines, to the systems that kept us honest, that kept us useful. The desk was simple, no clutter, just a laptop, a notepad, and the soft tick of an analog clock. My phone was off. No texts, no congratulations, just silence, and I liked it that way. Then came the knock. I looked up and smiled before he even opened the door. Dad stepped in, holding something wrapped in a small dish towel. He didn't say anything at first, just crossed the room in those old work boots and placed the bundle gently on the desk like it might break the surface. I unwrapped it. The mug, black ceramic, chipped handle. The one I'd packed the day I was fired, back when my hands were still too steady and my voice too small. He sat across from me, looked around, took in the space, the lack of flash, the presence of purpose. "This feels right," he said. I nodded. Took a while. He smiled, then picked up the mug, turned it in his hand, and placed it back down like a bookmark in time. "Now you've built something they can't erase." That hit harder than I expected. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. They tried to erase me, make me small, disposable, easier to ignore. But every rejection just sharpened the blade. Every silence gave me space to build. I'd never wanted applause, never needed revenge. I just needed to outlast their ignorance. And I had. The company had a new name now, a new culture. The rot was gone. The people who mattered were back. The ones who never stopped doing the work. We hired slow. We listened. No more vanity projects. No more viral rebrands. Just systems that ran quietly, efficiently, and respectfully. When Dad left the room, I stayed seated, looked out at the floor again, watched a new junior operator struggling to lift a misaligned crate, and then another worker stepped in without hesitation to help. No supervisors, no orders, just instinct. That was what we were rebuilding, and this time it would hold. The mug sat warm in my hands, and somewhere, far off in the back of my mind, I could still hear Harold shouting through my apartment door, begging to understand what I'd done. I hadn't done anything extraordinary. I just waited for them to clear the space. And then, like always, I built. They thought they eliminated me, but all they did was clear the space.